Personajes. Vamos a hablar de cómo nace Wolverine.
From his mama. Anyway, in any series, especially then, I don't think there was as much thought put into the storylines as happens now. That's not to say it wasn't as good, because the feedback I get from a lot of fans is the stories were better than they are now. In many, many cases, not everything, but in many, many cases. Maybe because they're trying too hard. I mean, you know, I had an editor-in-chief years ago that said, you know, don't get uptight about it. Just do it and have fun. And, you know, it's a comic book, you know. You're not writing the Ten Commandments, you know. You're not engraving something in stone, you know. So, I mean, and personally, prior to the corporations, which kind of control the marketing and all that now, it was a lot more fun that way. It was like, you know, in American Westerns, they were shooting from the hip, more or less, making things up as things came along. There was a vigor and a life that comic books had, I think, that is missing in many ways now. That being said, let me see, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, okay. So, Wolverine, the character Wolverine, was one of the many additional characters that appeared in the story solely, only for the purpose of that story. We made up villains. You know, we do a conference with Stan Lee, the artist, and you know, there was always a villain, and sometimes we'd use a villain that was established, like the Abomination, for instance, with a leader, or sometimes we'd come up with a villain like on the spot. There wasn't even any preparation for it. I just worked out a plot line from a discussion in Stan's office, and you know, about what the villain was supposed to be able to do and not to do. And I was just struck cold when I started drawing the book. Wolverine did have a little bit more thought than that. Roy Thomas, who was Stan's assistant, decided he wanted to represent Canada for some reason. I don't know if it was for every other reason that comics or publishing does a thing. It was probably to increase sales, to increase the market, increase the reading population. And his idea, you know, he had a Canadian superhero idea. And so, you know, there was a lot of thought that went around in our little area. Maybe it should represent a Canadian, an animal that's local to the Canadian wilderness. And Wolverine was decided upon, and then there were preliminary sketches done. John Romita did the finished sketch on the costume, and of course there was the writer, Len Wein, who was writing the script. His part was primarily to, I would say, give verbal definition to the character. How did the character talk? What did the character say? My main responsibility, which was really the only one that anybody really remembers or cares about, is the physical appearance of Wolverine. And my concern, my job, my responsibility was to give life to the character. How did he act physically? How did he move? How did he use his claws? When did he use his claws? I made made a few minor changes myself in the actual production drawing. And by the way, this was all done in about 3 days or 2 days. It was very quick, because once one book was finished, we had to immediately start doing the next issue. Otherwise, you're behind in the schedule. So, you know, they kind of overlap, and there wasn't in that respect, there wasn't a whole lot of time spent on the character. And like other characters that were created rather quickly, there was no expected shelf life, you know. I mean, it was a throwaway character, basically. And it was a throwaway character until truly he became a member of the X-Men and was the image that we're familiar with today, smoking a cigar, leather jacket, you know, cool hair, you know, and we saw Hugh Jackman in the movies. It was during that period that the Wolverine character completely exploded and became the popular figure that we know today. The ironic part is, I've done hundreds of requests for Wolverine, and they're all having to do with the original character. Nobody asked me to draw Hugh Jackman. They all asked me to draw the guy in the yellow spandex, which is actually, it's a difficult character to draw, because the mask is, you ever try it yourself. No, don't try it at home.
Ok, dice que en ese tiempo las historias se pensaban muy rápidamente debido a que tenían de un poco de tiempo para que el siguiente ejemplar. Menciona que lo mejor del caso es de que era para divertirse. Las historias de ese entonces eran para divertirse, no eran tan rebuscadas como en el día de hoy. Menciona que es también un personaje que era hecho como terciario, no tenía relevancia importante en lo que era el cómic, sino que se fue dando el suceso a través de todos estos fans, y tiene la preparación para, también menciona de un escritor el escritor Len Wein, que es representante de Canadá, o parece ser que era de Canadá, menciona que necesitaban un superhéroe canadiense para incrementar las ventas o para incrementar el nivel de lectura en ese país. Se decidieron por la vida salvaje, por el animal que es el Wolverine. Y lo decidieron varios artistas con varios bocetos, siendo Herb el que inventó ciertamente a Wolverine, pero él fue el que le dio los movimientos, cómo caminar, cómo sacar las garras, cómo retraerlas, la forma de fumar su cigarro, y le han dicho que Wolverine, el original, es mucho más fácil de hacer para él que hoy en día con Hugh Jackman, que es donde Wolverine ha despegado ciertamente a niveles estratosféricos de fans.
¿Qué hubiera pasado si le hubieran pedido el diseño de un personaje mexicano? ¿Qué animal, qué características, qué vicios, qué virtudes?
In other words, I need to design a character right here and now and come up. Has anybody got paper, pencil, la pluma, la lápiz, el lápiz? I was actually talking to somebody about this a little while ago. One thing that I'm fascinated with in Mexico is its history. There's a very rich history in culture and art and struggle. And to me, that kind of thing by itself makes great material literature, television, and so on. And a lot of it's been done, and a lot of it has been done by Hollywood in a kind of a Hollywood way. But I think I would, as I had mentioned to this other person, I think I would come up with a character from the period of the Revolution, and kind of build around that, and not so much that the character would have superpowers, but more like a Batman, where he was just physically trained in a way that he would have superior ability over most human beings. What his appearance might be, now that I would spend many hours doing research on clothing, and not only civilian but military clothing from the time, and other kinds of details about what the individual might wear, or as far as that goes. But he would definitely, the characteristic that would probably be most important to me in a character, in a superhero type hero, or hero, just a plain hero type, would be, unlike Wolverine, who is really not filled with compassion. He's just sort of a good guy that does bad things anyway. But the Mexican character would have a level of compassion. He would be representative of the Mexican people in that sense, which to me is something that sometimes is lacking in a superhero model. They're all a bunch of macho, strutting, types, especially the American superhero. This guy would be tough, but he would be silent, and he would have a heart that would be, as we say in the U.S., bigger than all outdoors.